All right, y'all, put your hands together for Angel Rivera.
Thank you. All right, thank you, everybody. First thing I want to do is give a round of applause to the awesome team here at RenderATL. I mean, this is my first time, and they did a hell of a job. I'm really impressed. So, second thing, this talk is a little deceiving. I put the front-end developers in there, but it applies to pretty much everyone. And the format I want to kind of take on today is not me talking at you, but let's have a little interactivity, right? So I'll be asking some questions, raise some hands, and then I want to have conversations, so I'm going to try to blow through this real quick. And then if anyone's triggered by anything I say or wants me to expand on anything, let's have that conversation, because Q&As, they suck, right? It's me telling you whatever I think. So I'd rather hear what you think. So let's start with this. There's a monitor there. So here's a quick agenda intro. I'll tell you about myself a little bit more in depth. And then we're going to talk about building software, DevOps, and then some of the lessons that I've actually learned from experience. And also, as a developer advocate, I speak to a lot of folks like yourself at conferences, and all of the input and feedback they give me on their experiences with DevOps. So hopefully you'll be a little educated on it and then have some lessons that you can take back to your teams if you're planning on implementing DevOps. So I'm Angel Rivera, developer advocate at Circle CI. I get, again, like I mentioned earlier, to talk to folks like yourself, understand how you're using technology, some of the challenges you're having with technology, and then bringing that information back to my team so that we can build valuable software that developers can use to build awesome tools, or awesome application services, whatever you're doing. So that's my Twitter and GitHub. There's QR codes to LinkedIn. I'm open to chatting with all of you, connecting with all of you. So that's me. I've been in the business since 1994, so I'm one of the old OG people that raise their hands. I've done tons of work primarily in systems and platforms. So I started my career off in the United States Air Force, working down in Cape Canaveral Air Force Station at NASA when we used to launch humans into space back then in the shuttle program. So kind of dating myself, but I've done tons of work in front-end, back-end, database, programming, schemas, security, mainframes, and managed developers and operational teams. So pretty good background. I'm pretty proud of it. So I just wanted to let you guys know this so that it brings some credibility to what I'm going to say in this presentation. So I identify as a developer, but with operational tendencies, because when I started, I wrote code, and the old kind of adage of like, hey, write code and throw it over the wall, you never see it again until someone says, hey, your stuff's broken, right? Like, and you have to fix it. So I always wondered, like, what happened? I cared about my code. I put all this effort into it. And I recommend that if you're a junior developer or a veteran developer, you take on that kind of mentality, because there's a lot more openness to building software today. And it's also good for your career. So you can have a better diverse background and experience. So let's talk about building software. Building software is hard as, right? So I know you all know this, right? We do it day in, day out. And a lot of times it's not really a very thankful job, right? We're just used to the grind, doing what we do, earning our paychecks, but it's really difficult, and you should give yourselves a pat on the back. Like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and I can tell you, many times it's like you get kind of numb to it, but then every now and then I build something, it's like, wow, I just built that, and you get that, I get reinvigorated, right? So let's just start off with that conversation, right? So I just want to define, kind of set the tone. So developers, right? Let's talk about software developers, since we're going to be talking about DevOps. Basically, I cribbed this off of the internet, and yeah, they were the creative brainstorms and masterminds, right? I think that was a cute kind of definition of developers. But let's talk about our alter egos, or our arch nemesis, or nemesi, whatever. Anyway, so system administrators, I respect them. I consider myself one as well. But for some reason, the definition, this was the shortest one I could find. We do a lot of things, right? And not to belittle the software development process, but there's a lot of nuance to both roles. But I brought this up so that we can talk about the two roles individually and separately, because they are different, right? So software developers, obviously, right, we're focusing on designing and building software. That's just a really small, short kind of definition again. And then system administrators, right, focusing on distributing that software, maintaining it, ensuring that the services that we're providing are functioning, they're available. Also, we're working towards building resilient systems, right? So expecting that when the system kicks over, falls over, that it can heal itself, right? That's kind of the end game, end stage. So, like I said, there's two different disciplines here, right? And how many software engineers or developers are in the room? Raise your hand for me, okay? How many folks consider themselves the SRE, system administrators, operators? 1, 2, 3? Wow, okay, so we're skewed. But again, there's two different disciplines, right? I mean, I think we can all agree, the focus is different in each discipline, right? So those differences are often kind of looked over by all of us. We kind of stay in our own zone, do our own thing, but it creates conflict. Like I said, when I was writing code back in the day, they were like, hey, just save your compiled artifacts in a network share or put it on a floppy and walk it down to the data center, right? And I never saw it again unless there was a bug. So eventually, I started going down there, knocking on the door. Hey, I can't debug this on my machine, right? This is not working. And they were a little hesitant in the beginning, but over time, they just realized, this guy just cares about what he's doing. And I kind of won them over, and then after that, they trained me in the dark arts, right, of operations, so to speak. And I'm pretty proud of that. It's really hard to break in on both sides, right, to understand that. So that conflict exists, right? And why does that conflict exist? I ask myself all the time. And over my career and in discussions with people, 3 things that come to mind, and they're kind of solid explanations, right? So we're talking about friction here. And that friction kind of comes from just people focusing in and doing the best job that they can. Software developers are designing the systems, they're writing the code, they're testing it, they're making sure that it's as bug-free as possible. System administrators, again, are deploying that code, right? Making it available to the public. So they're kind of the gatekeepers of that. And when that's pushed out to the public and there's problems, that's where kind of the worlds kind of collide, because we're not talking to each other very well. We're not communicating. And I don't know why, 28 years later, it's still like that, even with all these concepts and such, right? So the other piece that causes this conflict is isolation, right? So when we're talking about building things, whether it's deploying and building infrastructure to host these apps or building the apps themselves, we tend to keep that knowledge siloed, right? And there's a reason for it, because like I said, building software is hard, right? And when we're building our software, we're focused on putting the best quality out there, so that tends to create these silos. So that's another reason, right? These conflicts, everything's kind of in their own little domain, and the communication isn't good at all. And finally, right, complexity. Like I said, this stuff that we do, it can get really, really complex, really, really fast. And it takes sometimes teams of hundreds of people, right, to manage these things. So imagine orchestrating people, orchestrating the flow of all that code, the workflows that we do, the automation behind it, then deploying that stuff and having it function. That's really, really hard to kind of orchestrate and get right. So for me, the biggest pain point is the ineffective cultures, right? So having said all the things that I said about developers and operators, this is kind of where DevOps was born, out of those frustrations, right? And if you look at the term DevOps, right? It's just developer and operations. Anybody in the room know the person who coined this phrase? Anybody? No? All right, well, I'll tell you. His name is Patrick Dubois. And Patrick Dubois is a Belgian. I've met him a few times. Awesome person, beautiful human. He was also the founder of the first DevOps Days in Belgium. So if you don't know that conference and you want to learn more about DevOps, definitely hit one of those up. They're generally free, right? Or like $30 or something. It's dirt cheap to go. But it's a really cool conference that I recommend you at least try once, right? But Patrick, I'm on Twitter, so I pinged him and I asked him, hey, I'm prepping for this talk, and I wanted to get his updated view of, DevOps. Like, what's your current definition? Because it's been out for a while, like a decade or more now, and that concept, right? So he actually responded, and this is pretty much what he responded, right, with. So DevOps is everything you do to overcome friction created by silos, and the rest is plain engineering, which kind of falls in line with Angel's take on DevOps. This has been my mantra for a long time, and my definition is the finessing of these handoffs and touch points between roles and teams, right? While we're building software, securing it, releasing, and operating software, but collaboratively, right? That's the key word there. Well, finessing and then the collaborative part. Because as we know, right, software engineers, even system administrators, we're a unique breed, right? Myself included, we tend to focus solely on the mission at hand and the social interactions, not all, but in general, right? We're a little lacking. Let's just leave it at that, and we can do better. So the collaboration is really important if you're going to take on some sort of DevOps initiative within your teams. So another kind of way I look at DevOps is what a team or individuals or organization needs, and it comes in many flavors. So an implementation that maybe a company A does can be completely different than how company B defines DevOps in their organization. And the reason is it's essentially a culture, right? It's a culture shift. It's all about the people, right? We're building software. We're human beings, and when we're building software, we have to remember that we're humans and we're feeding machines, right? And we're getting stuff done on machines. And I think we tend to lose a little bit of that mentality, right? So some of the benefits, right, of a fitting or a successful DevOps culture is basically it empowers individuals, right, and teams. So that means the people on your teams feel confident enough to, make decisions and create change and not fear any kind of reprisal or blame, right? That's one thing that I would stress out of all of these is really important to foster that type of environment. It eliminates these intimidation barriers, and then, it prioritizes the effective communication. So again, we can do a lot better and understand what our counterparts are doing by just having normal conversations about the work that you're either planning to do or you're in the process of doing, right? And I'm talking specifically around if you're touching code that another person's gonna touch after you, you should probably talk about who's gonna touch that code first before you even start coding, because you can eliminate all those conflicts right off the bat, and then not have to deal with your Scrum Master or whoever's release managers are getting angry about, this should have been done in 2 days, not 2 weeks. So those are the kind of things that communication and collaboration bring outside of the code. And then obviously it enables you teams to organically educate one another, right? So if we're collaborating, you're starting to learn what each other is doing, and you're understanding kind of how they work, they're understanding how you work, and it just comes together eventually over time, patterns and such. So and always be learning. That's another mantra of mine. This, for me, in this technology space as a developer, this job is 99% learning 99% people, and 1% engineering. So kind of falls in line with what Patrick had in mind, right? So yeah, I saw this on the internet, so I had to take this as well. DevOps, right? Like you see the two kind of fighting each other over this infinite loop of continuous integration, I believe. So ideally, this is what a successful DevOps implementation will yield in your CI/CD tool, right? At the end of the day, it's all about having success. And as you can see, there's different segments, right? And as you move to the right, you'll see that things start turning from code to, right, CI/CD, which is kind of testing, security, and then it starts going into that build image, right? Now we're starting to package things up, and we're pushing it, and then operations kind of takes over, right? So at the end state, you want to deploy this thing and then have what I call smoke tests to make sure that, you know, your system's running, it's there, and then you can have more extensive testing in production, which is kind of scary for some, but definitely recommend you start looking into that. So now that I kind of covered DevOps and what it means and some of my experiences, I'm going to jump into kind of a hot topic, at least for me, regarding DevOps. So one popular DevOps take is you build it, you own it. Anybody in the room work on a team that I guess has adopted this mentality or this way of building software where you're a developer and you're expected to know your job and also how that whole flow of orchestrating releases, security, all those things, right? And your bosses are like, yeah, you're on call as well with the sysadmins, right? Like, is there anybody in the room? Raise your hand. Wow. It sucks, right? Like, I was on call, but I never had to, this wasn't forced down my throat. So I hope you know where this is going, right? So, all right, so you build it, you own it. This is kind of the intended result, right? Where this is the kind of stuff that I hear from folks that are pro, you build it, you own it, which is developers and operators, right? They start beginning to understand and perform the tasks that each other is responsible for. It breaks down, remember those silos and the friction kind of starts deteriorating that, breaking that down so that it eliminates it, hopefully. They also believe, and some of this has been proven, but the teams progressively build a mutual respect and rapport with one another. So those pain points start, again, going away. And that finessing starts happening, right, that I so talk about. And then finally, right, your organization and your teams start benefiting from being efficient and optimized operations. But the reality is, it's very difficult to establish and maintain. Like, I don't know, for the folks that have been through it, if you were there when these policies were kind of implemented on your teams, and I know from personal experience, it's very hard, to establish this. And once you establish it, it's totally possible. But once you get over the hump of, getting folks to buy in and getting management to buy in, and you have to be the rah-rah champion, cheerleader type to keep people motivated. And it happens, right? There's developers that are actually naturally interested, but it's very few, it's very rare that has happened in my career. That to meet people like myself, right, that are just like, wow, I just want to learn all the things, right? And I don't have to be a master of all of them. So again, the buy-in from the individuals, and then the dependent on those champions. So the folks who actually initiate those programs and initiatives, they're the ones who are responsible generally for motivating and inspiring the teams to keep it going, right? Keep it alive. Like I said, it's a cheerleader, champion, rah-rah. And then once those folks kind of move on, I've seen this happen a few times, everyone kind of regresses back to how we operated before. And the gains are definitely temporary. in my experience and in my conversations. Like, yeah, you can like be functioning this way for a year or two, but then people start dropping off. It becomes too much. Developers, right? We're focused on building code or writing code and getting our systems right, designing these things so they're perfect. And once we start kind of branching into operations, it happened to me. I started losing focus on what I was actually tasked to do. And then, of course, that decreases the morale, right? So the pain points of you build it, you own it, right? Again, the diminishing effects of the developer's interest in the code because you're just kind of spread too thin. It's very dangerous. Operations, same thing, right? It's the inverse of that. Now you're trying to understand how developers are writing their code, and then you're really not paying attention to the things that really matter, which is uptime, keeping the systems resilient and available. Now, with all of that happening, what starts to happen is people's expertise in specific subject matter starts diminishing as well. So they're no longer staying on top of the new technology, right? They're just like, okay, I got too much to do and we're overtaxed. And that will, again, lower morale and potentially create high turnover, which in this industry, someone yesterday was like, wow, you've been with Circle CI 4 years. They were shocked. Like, I guess because I've been there so long. And in this industry, we tend to turn over our jobs quickly. I don't know if it's indicative of just more pay, which is totally fine, or you're just not happy, or maybe you need to be challenged more. Whatever the reason is, that's the reality, right? So this is my take on you build it, you own it. So it's kind of bullshit, right? Like, it's proven. And this is why. I don't like to just shit on something and then not give you reasons, but the silos are fine when the individuals are, interested in what they're doing, but I believe the other side of that is the communication and collaboration has to be there, right? So you can keep your expertise, your silo, stay in your lanes, but you need to also allow for, I guess, passing and changing of lanes, right? Like, understand what the other teams that you're interfacing with are doing and how they're doing it. That's just a foundational thing that I think everybody needs to understand, everybody needs to kind of embrace. And you don't have to go any deeper than that if you don't want to, in my opinion, in my experience. So obviously, when that's happening, the individuals then become the experts in their domain. They're the badasses of building front-end UIs, which is super difficult. I used to do it back in the 90s when the internet started booming. I learned the DOM inside and out. There were no frameworks, right? The ones that I was using were the ones that I built. So Internet Explorer was the hottest browser around, and you build a website for that, it didn't work. The Netscape was just a nightmare. Now we have all these awesome tools that abstract all that away. So you become an expert in those tools, and that's super important, right? You want those subject matter experts. But then that leads to a genuine interest, right, across a team, which means everyone's just knows enough that they understand the process and they're able to talk through and collaborate on things before they become problems. So again, the stay in your lane mentality kind of goes away, and enables you to kind of cross over when you need to, and more importantly, when you want to, right? That's really important to me, and I'm sure for a lot of folks here. And then the resiliency, right? You can focus on the next generation of operations, so to speak, and applications, which is making your systems resilient, right? That's what we're actually trying. That's the gold standard in my mind. So before I retire, I would like to see a pretty badass platform that will, take applications and make it resilient. And a lot of companies are doing it already, like Netflix. I know Google's got a couple things going on. I'm not sure about some of the other big dogs, but we won't name names there. So again, I'm going to leave you with the finessing of handoffs, my definition of DevOps, which is the finessing of all those handoffs and making sure that you're collaborating. So One last thing I'm going to leave you with is that DevOps is not. So I'm trying to bust some myths here and some I guess, falsehoods. DevOps is not infrastructure as code. So get that out of your heads. DevOps is not Docker or containers. DevOps is not CI/CD pipelines, although they are related. Do not confuse the two. They're related because the way the workflow works and the concepts are very similar, but they are not CI/CD pipelines. DevOps is not a software solution or a platform. So any company that's selling you DevOps products or products with the name DevOps in it, they're full of shit too. So DevOps is not Kubernetes. I get this all the time, right? Like we're doing DevOps. We deployed Kubernetes, and it's like, no, that's not DevOps, right? And DevOps is definitely not easily achieved. This is the biggest thing I want you to walk away with is it's not easy to implement a culture shift, right? And the reason is it's about people, right? DevOps is about people, and people equals culture. And when you have a culture, it's just like anything else. It's an organic thing that you have to nurture, you have to feed it, you have to maintain it, and you have to do a status health check on it, right? And yeah, this is our awesome team at Circle CI. I just wanted to show you that it's about the people. And that's my talk. We do have some reports that I wanted to share with folks about how to build high-performing teams. This is data that we've compiled out of our platform, and we run everyone's or all of our customers' builds, so we know how many times teams fail. We don't look at the source code, obviously, but the metadata for the stuff that we run. These reports are really cool if you're interested in how to increase the velocity of your releases and how to kind of benchmark your teams if you're interested in that. We are hiring, so I definitely would like to see a few faces in here apply for some jobs. The company's great. I've been there for years. So if you're definitely looking for a new gig, you can use this QR code, check it out. And then stop by our booth. We've got a raffle going on for an R2-D2 Lego set. I don't know who picked that, but it wasn't me. But if you win, you get that mailed out to you. And then one more thing, thank you again for indulging me and listening to me. And again, if you want to reach out, just hit me up on Twitter or LinkedIn. Thank you.